Hi, friends. Happy Monday. This is Lindsay Cross, Government Relations Director with Florida Conservation Voters. I hope that you had a fantastic weekend. I wanted to share some updates with you about the MCOR's task force process because we hit an important deadline, an important milestone just a couple days ago. I know you all have been with this fight with us for more than 15 months since the task force process started in August of 2019. Hard to imagine that it's been that long. But on November 15th, that was the deadline for the three task forces to submit their final reports to the DOT Secretary Tebow, to Governor DeSantis, and to our legislative leaders. And DOT did, in fact, transmit the three task force reports. They did that late afternoon, Thursday, November 12th. So they avoided submitting it on Friday the 13th, which may have been an ominous, ominous deadline. But I wanted to share some of the just kind of the high level things from the task force reports because I've gone through them. Members of the No Roads to Ruin Coalition were also combing through them to pull out the most salient things so that you all don't have to go through the process of reading these 70-page reports. So again, DOT submitted the final reports for each three of the task forces on Thursday afternoon. For those of you not as familiar with the MCOR's process, Senate Bill 7068, which was passed in 2019, legislated the creation of three task forces to evaluate the need for and the environmental and economic impacts of creating potentially three new corridors through our state, which could be up to 330 new miles of tolled roads. Those three focus areas are the Southwest Central area, which goes from Collier to Polk County in Southwest Florida. The Suncoast Connector, which goes from Citrus County up into the border of Florida and Georgia, and then a smaller four-county area, which is considered the Northern Turnpike Connector area. So those three areas in total make up quite a significant portion of our state. Most of these are in rural communities, some of them with populations of 200,000 people or less, some considerably less than that. So throughout this process, Florida Conservation Voters and with you all, with our backing, have been very adamant that there's not a need for these roads, and really that there would be some serious implications for our water, our wildlife, our agriculture, our rural communities, and our taxpayers. And what I can tell you from the final reports is they clearly speak to those issues and those concerns. The most important things are that, first of all, that none of the task forces were able to reach a conclusion that, based on the information available, that there is need for what DOT calls a new greenfield corridor. So that would be building a road where one does not exist, nor modifications to existing facilities through these study areas to achieve the statutory purpose. So what's important about that, that saying the statutory purpose, one of the purposes is to revitalize rural communities, to protect our environment and our natural resources. So when we look into the report and some of the things about these guiding principles and how to do specific things, we need to get back to the why. Why are we doing these things? If the goal and the statutory purpose of MCORs is to revitalize rural communities, to provide things like broadband, to protect our environment, to improve our water quality, we do not need a road to do that. And we certainly don't need 330 new miles of toll roads. So the reports make that statement that the task forces, after a really grueling 15-month process, each task force met about a dozen times. I can tell you I personally attended 30 meetings, either in person or virtually, provided comments at those meetings. The task forces could not reach that conclusion. The task forces also had what they considered a preference for improving or expanding existing major highway corridors. So that means that they prefer that anything that's happening in that study area, that they use existing roadways and right-of-ways if there are needs that have been determined in the future, but not putting new greenfield corridors. And another important consideration is for no build to be an alternative in the future project development activities. But really, the reports show that there's not a demonstrated need and that there's not economic viability to create these roads. And it is concerning that we've invested over hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money to say what we knew at the beginning of this process, that there was no documented need and that the cost to our state, which could be up to $25 billion if these new roads were built and the corresponding infrastructure, this is a really expensive undertaking that we just cannot afford, irregardless of the COVID-19 pandemic. But this global economic and health crisis really underscores how important it is for us to be putting the true priorities of Floridians at the top, rather than these type of politically motivated projects like MCORs that have more backing from the special interests than they do from the people of Florida. So let me go through some more items in the task force reports. DOT did look at some of the concerns that Floridians expressed in their public comments. As I've mentioned to you before, DOT has not been fully transparent in categorizing the percentage of comments that were for or against these roads or neutral. Members of the No Roads to Ruin Coalition, which includes 99 businesses and organizations around the state. We had a group of volunteers that spent hundreds of hours combing through nearly 10,000 comments. 93% of those people that submitted comments were opposed to building these roads. In DOT's analysis, they looked at what the top 3 concerns were from Floridians, and it's not surprising that the concerns were impacts to wildlife habitat, impacts to property and rural quality of life, and significant concerns over the project cost. And those are things that, if you look at the cost to our natural areas, to the character of some of these smaller towns and these rural communities, and the impact that all of us as taxpayers would have to shoulder, that's reason enough to say no build, and that these roads to ruin, that this project needs to be repealed. All right, a few more things. Actually, lots of stuff in these documents, but I'll try and go through and not take up all of your Monday morning. Again, the high-level needs, the way DOT describes it, is this something to answer the question of why? And if why we're doing this is to revitalize our rural communities, to make them more competitive, to allow them to work from home and to school their children at home through these virtual learning platforms, we know that having access to high-speed broadband is critical. This is something that does not have to have a road tied to it. And I would urge our legislators in the 2021 session to put money into bringing some of these broadband services to our rural communities. We know that technology is changing rapidly and that satellite-based technology is going to become more available and more affordable. So having to install broadband and fiber optic when you're building a new road really is going to be outdated technology, and the needs of our rural communities are now, and we should be heeding that charge. So again, if we're looking to protect our water and our habitats and create more opportunities for connection for wildlife, again, a road is counteractive to those goals, and something that we should be investing in at a state level, because it is something that Floridians care so deeply about. I do want to mention that in the recent election that we had some phenomenal wins at a conservation level locally. There were referendums in 4 different counties around the state, including Orange County, Volusia, Collier, and Manatee, where voters overwhelmingly, sometimes up to 86%, voted yes on referendum to fund water and land protection and conservation, to give rights to nature. So we know that Floridians care about our environment and really are demanding that our elected leaders at the local, the state, and the federal level make those investments. That's why we think that those things should be happening without the strings attached of a toll road, like was envisioned for the MCORS process. Going through the report, again, some of the high-level recommendations for the task forces was to, first of all, maximize the use of existing facilities, so not building roads where they are not needed. Again, DOT was not able to provide information to the task forces that allowed them to meet their statutory charge, which is, first of all, deciding whether there's a need for these roads or the economic viability for them. And because of that, they made those statements in the report. There were actually several task force members that did not sign on to the reports because they felt like those things could not be accomplished, or that the task force reports were not going to be supportive enough of our natural environment, and that there was too much potential for low density urban sprawl that tends to happen when we build new road corridors. We know that these sprawling developments can be, consume just tens of thousands of acres of our natural and our agricultural areas. They're a very outdated way of building, and it's something that's not sustainable. We know that our population in Florida is growing, but we need to have ways to do it in a more strategic and sustainable way. And we also need to be putting investments into our infrastructure where it's needed right now, making some of those shifts to multimodal transportation and transportation options that are not focused on the single occupancy vehicles and those vehicles that are using those dirty fossil fuels. But getting towards more walkable and livable neighborhoods should be a goal for any of the new development that we're investing in. The task force reports outline some guiding principles, and they're kind of grouped into some certain areas. Some of them are related to technology, transportation modes, technology, ways to maintain community character and make sure that local development plans and comprehensive plans or metropolitan planning organizations, that DOT is looking at those plans. That's a concern that we had, that the MCORS legislation was really trying to shoehorn local plans into this bigger infrastructure plan, and it's just not fair for these type of local plans to not get the credibility that they deserve. We know how important it is to let our locals lead, and we see a lot of preemption in Tallahassee that prevents local elected officials from doing what's right for their communities. So we hope that the DOT going forward is going to respect the wishes of these local communities. We know that there's been several around the state that have actually passed no-build resolutions, including Levy County, Alachua County, which is just outside of the study areas, but would have some of the impacts if a new toll road was created. So the bulk of the guiding principles focuses on the natural environment, because we know that's not only what Floridians care about, but just concerns of building new development, whether it's roads, whether it's new urban centers or industrial centers. Our environment is the thing that really takes the brunt of these impacts. And once you destroy some of these natural areas and these productive agricultural places, there's just really no way to get them back. So the task forces in the reports have urged DOT, when looking at future road development, to look at environmental impacts in this specific priority. First of all, to avoid negative impacts. Second, to minimize and mitigate. And third, to enhance, restore, and connect resources while continuing to avoid, minimize, and mitigate. So there's some areas where DOT has committed to to having no adverse impacts. That includes things like our springs heads, lakes, and high-risk coastal areas, and that they would not put new corridors through some of our coastal areas or Florida Forever projects. There were recommendations by some of the task force members to be a lot more aggressive and proactive. And unfortunately, DOT did not take that step to move forward with some of those more aggressive conservation measures. As you'll notice in the report, a lot of things they have put off into future stages of what they call PD&E, planning, design, and environment stages. What that does is it leaves us today without knowing how to protect our environment. And without having some of those assurances in writing, we can't know that our natural environment will be protected. That's one of the reasons why 1,000 Friends of Florida, who had membership in each of the task forces, did not sign on to the report. Again, it is not a consensus report because it did not have sign off by all of the members of the task forces. So despite DOT's really aspirational goal of having this be consensus, they could not reach that. So I think that's important to note. Some of the other considerations for the natural environment include protecting our water resources. And there's kind of a focus on using something called best management practices and looking at stormwater improvements. And what I want to note here is that there are significant water quality needs that we have in our state already. We have hundreds of total maximum daily loads, abbreviated as TMDLs, in the state basin management action plans. We know that the work that we're doing right now is not protective enough of our water quality, especially in some of our springs areas where our springs are very sensitive to increases in nutrient pollution from septic systems, from agriculture, from urban and residential runoff. We know that we are not being aggressive enough to make sure that we're protecting our springs, that we're protecting our drinking water and our aquifer. So regardless of the more kind of putting more money down into our BMPs, we are not at the place yet where we can say that our water qualities have been protected and we're just at a maintenance stage. We actually need to be more aggressive about how we're implementing pollution control measures, having even stronger legislation that will protect our waters, both our freshwater and our estuarine and coastal waters. So there's no way that building these roads is going to help improve our water resources. There's a backlog of wastewater infrastructure upgrades that need to happen, whether that's connecting people to centralized sewer that are currently on septic, whether it's looking at some of our wastewater treatment plants and making those necessary upgrades. That is where our taxpayer dollars should be going right now. It should not be going to the roads with an aspirational goal of maybe getting to some of these things in the process of it. So again, if we're answering the question of why do we need these roads? We do not need roads to improve our water quality. We do not need new roads to protect our wildlife habitat. We do not need new roads to provide services like broadband to our rural communities. So for those reasons, we have continued to advocate for no build. And now that we're turning the page, this task force process has been completed, we're going to be looking to the 2021 legislative session and calling for a repeal of SB 7068 and the ability to put that money, those hundreds of millions, those eventually billions of dollars of taxpayer money into the projects that we actually need as Floridians, with a focus on looking at the budget deficits that we're going to have as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We know that we are going to have to be tightening our belt, that we will have to look at every way that we're spending money in the state. And if our legislators are not able to look at this as really a black mark, but also an opportunity to free up money, to free up more than $100 million this year, to continue to free that money up in the future, all of our legislators across the aisle need to be looking at the MCORS program as a place to free up money to repeal this legislation and get to the business of protecting Floridians and improving our environmental quality and our overall quality of life that we enjoy in this state. All right, looking at a few more things, I do want to talk about the no build. This is something that we have pushed for throughout the process, and all of you that have responded to DOT with your comments, with your emails, participation in the task force meetings, whether that's virtually or in person. That has been so productive, and we are so appreciative of that. I don't feel that we would have so much consideration of no build in the report if it wasn't for all of you who continue to sound that alarm and talk about how critical it is. DOT, unfortunately, has a definition of no build, which I feel, which I've mentioned before, I feel is a little bit disingenuous because the MCORS program is envisioned as being more than roads. We thought that the idea of decoupling the roads from the goals like protecting our natural areas and improving our water resources and providing broadband, that you could decouple those things and put investments into those things that we need right now. However, the way DOT defines no build in the task force reports is that that would be no major capacity investments in the study area, as well as in later phases, that would be no capacity improvements in specific areas. But it also means that those other aspirational goals, like improving the environment, like protecting or providing broadband, that those DOT will not make investments in that without corresponding transportation infrastructure. And so I feel like that is something that is disingenuous, and that the idea of no build is really referring to the roads that are going to have the destruction, but that we should be making the investments in those in the rural communities and protecting our agriculture and our natural areas. DOT is not able to look at the funding specifically and how much this would cost our state if they do continue to push forward with this. That will not happen until what they consider the 30% design phase, which would likely mean that we are investing hundreds of millions of more taxpayer dollars into this program. The DOT did make the commitment that that they would not, the projects that are in its 5-year work plan right now for fiscal year 2021 to 2025 would not be impacted by MCORS, but there's not an assurance that after 2025 that those projects would not kind of receive a lower priority with a preference for MCORS. The legislation right now requires that construction start in 2022 and that this program is essentially complete by the year of 2030. It's interesting to note that the task forces requested that the legislature either extend or remove the deadlines for corridor construction and other milestones because of the really aggressive timeline that this legislation put forward, as well as the significant economic hurdles that our state is going to endure right now because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think it was smart for the task force members to recommend that. Again, we think that we need to take it another step forward and not just remove those deadlines, but to repeal this program altogether and put the money back into protecting our community members and our natural areas, like Floridians tell us time and time again that they value. So that is kind of a high-level summary of the task force reports. They're available on DOT's MCORS website. And I believe if you go to MCORS right now, that's the first thing that you're going to see when you pull up the floridamcors.com. We are going to be continuing to engage in this issue. We will just be shifting to a legislative strategy next year and working on those plans right now. So I, again, want to thank everyone who has been engaged in this. There has been huge support from the public opposing the roads to ruin. through your comments, through your participation in the meetings. We can't do this work without you. I was doing a tally of some of the ways that we've been able to reach the public through our media engagements. Just a quick tally, probably 50 or more times that that Florida Conservation Voters has been named in articles, and that does not include all the other times that our phenomenal partners and other advocates and Floridians, concerned community members were able to share their concerns through op-eds, through letters to the editors. So that sharing of that information with your fellow community members and your neighbors continues to be important, because even though the task force process has wrapped up, this will just take us into this next stages where we will work on legislation to repeal the MCOR statute. So thank you all for spending part of your Monday morning with me. I hope that you are all staying safe, that you are taking the necessary precautions to continue to be respectful of this COVID-19 pandemic. I hope that you all have plans to give thanks during the upcoming holidays, but in a way that is respectful and safe for yourself and those around you. We can't do the things that we do in Florida without all of you, and we appreciate all of you in the conservation voter movement. Thank you so much. I look forward to sharing more updates with you when they're available, but for now, we'll kind of take a pause as the task force process comes to a close. Again, if you have would like to view the reports, they're available on DOT's MCOR's website. They were due to the Secretary Tebow, the governor, and legislative leaders on November 15th. They were delivered on November 12th. And again, no consensus, no documented need for these new roads, a strong preference from the task force members for no build, serious concerns about how new and expanded roads would impact our natural resources, our wildlife, our water resources, and really an emphasis on how we should best support our community members, making sure that local priorities stay local priorities, that we can continue to have choices in how Floridians live, that we will continue to have thriving rural areas with broadband and the services that they need, but without the roads and sprawling development that will irreversibly damage the character of those communities. So again, thank you all for being involved. Stay safe. Continue to fight for the Florida that you love, and I hope you get some time outside as we hopefully start to get some cooler fall weather. Enjoy the time outside, socially distanced with friends and family members. We are so blessed to live in this beautiful state, and it's because of people like you that we continue to protect the places that make Florida so special. So thank you all, and enjoy your week. Bye.